Kalman, where and when were you born?
In Riga, Latvia, 1924, September 14th.
Tell me about your family, if you remember anything about grandparents.
Well, I remember my grandfather, who was quite old. I mean, I was very young, and he looked, to me like 100 years old, but he was probably about 60 or 70, and he died. And after that, I've just saw him briefly, actually, as a child. And I don't know what he died of or whatever. He had a beard, and he was very religious, I remember, because he was going to shul all the time.
What was his name?
I don't remember his name, believe it or not. I don't remember my grandfather's name. I was about probably 4 or 5 years old. So he went to shul. I remember he was always having a tallis and tefillin legen and the whole thing. So that's all I remember. I think he probably lived until I was 5 or 5.5 years old.
Do you know what he did for a living?
I don't know what he did for a living.
Do you remember his wife, your grandmother?
My grandmother died. He was only alone at that time.
Mother's or father's father?
No, this was my father's father. My mother came from Lithuania, and my father came from Russia. And that's all I remember about my grandfather. I remember he had a long beard, and he was medium height, and that's all. I never had him speak Russian at home, because they came from Russia. My grandfather came from Russia also, I presume. I mean, it's what my father told me later on. But they never spoke Russian at home. They only spoke Yiddish. And my mother, I guess my mother couldn't speak Russian. Yes, she came from Lithuania. Lithuanians, the Jews didn't speak Russian. At least she didn't, I don't know, maybe some of them did. So at home they communicated in Yiddish only. And, but as I said, I don't remember my grandfather, except for seeing him a few times and seeing what he looked like, and he was always going to, maybe 3 times a day he was going to shul, and he was very religious, and that's all I remember about him.
Tell me about your parents.
My father was he was a shoe designer, women's shoes. And he worked with his brother, who's my uncle, and 2 of his relatives worked with him. Now 4 of them worked in a little, they call it a factory, a small space with 4 people working there. And he would do design the shoe, the top of the shoe, and then they would send it out to a place where they would put the bottom of it, But mainly, as I remember, there were a lot of people that came to his small factory where they would commission him to do a pair of shoes, 1 pair of shoes only, of that kind, And it's very interesting, because now when I go and look to a shoe store, I see the same kind of shoes which was done 60 years ago, I mean, it's like he would have designed it, It's very strange, how the style came back, And I used to go in there once in a while and watch him making the drawings and cutting it, and somebody else was doing something else, and that's what my father was doing.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
One brother.
Younger?
5 years older.
Older.
And he became also, after the war, when he came back to Latvia and he couldn't find anybody, he started also doing the same thing as my father did. And he worked in a Russian factory designing shoes.
Did you want to become a shoe designer when you were a kid?
Never. When I was a kid, my parents, of course, didn't want me to become an artist. I was drawing and sketching. By the time I was 7 years old, they discovered that that I had talent. I did a lot of drawings of my family. My parents, my uncles, people that they knew that came to the house. I would take out a pencil or a crayon, and I would do a drawing of them. Portraits, actually. I remember that very distinctly, that there were good likeness at that time, And at age 7, a gallery discovered that somebody told the gallery that I had lots of drawings, and it was very unusual for my age to to draw like that with the likeness of people, you know. So the gallery gave me an exhibition. I had a first one-man boy show at age 7. And that was very unusual. I mean, at that time, I don't think anybody did that. And they sold out the show because everybody wanted their own picture, you know. So, you know, I'm sure there was very little money involved. And my parents took the money. I remember it very distinctly. We went to the gallery the next day, and the walls were empty. My mother and I was really worried because somebody stole my pictures, you know. And what happened was everyone. See, those days when you had a show in a gallery, they would give it to the people when they bought the picture. They would give it to them and take off the picture of the wall, and you know, and they would leave a drawing, whatever it was, and leave the empty space there in between. And I don't remember what kind of gallery it was. It was a gallery in Latvia, Riga, and the man was a Jewish gallery owner, and I remember that. And but I don't know how good or bad a gallery it was. But all I know that my pictures were hanging there. You know. So after that, of course, the word got around that I was doing portraits of people, and suddenly I was making, as a young boy, I was getting money for portraiture, for doing portraits. And that's how I started my career.
Did you go to art school?
Well, then I did a portrait. I was commissioned to do a portrait of the Prime Minister of Latvia.
At what age?
At 13. Okay. And that was an experience in itself, because the Latvians were anti-Semitic, as everybody knows, you know, very big anti-Semites. They hated the Jews. And the Prime Minister was also anti-Semite. So I did a portrait of him, and my mother took it there. Afterwards, I was finished it, and she took it there. And I don't know how it got there, how they took it there, but I was at home. And next day, 2 days later, there was a big write-up in the Jewish newspaper and the Latvian newspaper. So, you know, I was a celebrity at 13. And I was going to Hebrew school at the time. So the school was celebrating by you know, the fact that the Prime Minister was that he appreciated that I did it of him, because I was in the Latvian newspaper. And this was in 1937. So that's my start. The start of my career. And then I went to art school in Riga, Latvia.
At what age?
I was 15 and a half actually. Started going to art school. Then the Russians came in when I was 16. Yeah, I was 16. But 15. I was 15 when I started art school. So then the Russians came in, and they still went to art school. And then the Germans, of course, came. After the Germans came in, it was the end of it.
How long were the Russians there?
1 year.
From when to when?
From 40 to 41. Then the Germans came in.
And then what happened?
Well, when the Germans came in, before the Germans came in, my uncle one of my uncles was a wealthy man. He had a factory where they would convert schmattes, you know, old clothes to. We had bales of material, and they were converting it into material. You know, in other words, somebody else used it to redo them. You know, to
recycle.
Recycle. This is the word, yeah, right. And he was a wealthy man, and my father and my uncle tried to tell him, "Let's get out of here. The Germans are in Poland, and they're coming to Latvia." When people knew about it. I mean, you know, the word spread around, because many Polish Jews came to Latvia, escaped from Poland. And I remember my father had clients. He was dealing with some Polish Jews to sell them leather, you know, the upper leather. And so they knew that the Germans were getting close. So my uncle wouldn't go. You know, he had a big factory. He had a very good life. You know, he had I mean, he was living in luxury practically, and he didn't want to leave the luxury. But my father and uncle were smart enough to realize that they don't want to follow my uncle, you know. So one day, they put the stuff together, you know, whatever belongings we could carry on our back, and we left. We went to the railway station. As we arrived at the railway station, we had shooting going on, machine guns, shooting, yelling, screaming, crying. What happened was the Latvians, before the Germans came in, the Latvians suddenly, I don't know who they were, they put on the swastika, and they suddenly became the SS. I mean, they were helping the SS, you know, the Latvian SS, you know. I don't know what they were called that way, but when they were for the Germans, you know. And they were shoot at the people going to the railway station, and they were all Jews, of course. And so when we heard all the noise and the yelling and screaming, of course we started running back, and it wasn't that much of a distance from there to our house. And we lived in a Jewish neighborhood. It was called Moskova Gas, you know, which was Moskova Siela in Lettish. So as we ran back, the Latvians were standing up on the rooftops, two of them shooting at the people running back.
From the railroad.
My brother got a bullet in his shoulder, and we were running to our house, you know, figuring maybe tomorrow or whatever, we'll try to get out somehow. My father, at least, thought, but by that time, we couldn't get out. I mean, it was very risky to get out in the street and go back there. Besides, there were a lot of dead people there. We found out later on. So we got stuck. We closed the gate. It was an apartment building, and we were in the back of the building. My uncle owned one of my uncles owned the building in front, 5-story building, and there was a house in the back. My uncle lived in one part of the house, and my father and family, two families lived in the same house, but there were two separate units for the apartment, like a duplex, you know. And then the Germans came in. Now, when the Germans came in, the Germans did not know obviously where the Jews were living, you know. I mean, they had to find out from the Latvians. So they, very soon after, I don't remember how many days, a few days, I guess they didn't realize, they found out where the Jews were, and they sent the Latvians to pick up the Jews. So my father was pulled out of the house, of the apartment, my uncle, and my mother and my father, both of them realized what was going on, that they hid us in the, where they hang the clothes, I don't know what they call those things.
Chiffonier.
You know, those big boxy kind of thing where you put clothes in. I don't know what's in English, what the word in English is. You know what I mean?
Shafa.
Shafa? That's what it is.
Hamper.
Well, it's like a big box, you know, instead of a closet, it was wardrobe, yeah, that type of thing, yeah. And we were hiding inside there, and they didn't look in there, you know, so we were spared. So my mother was, my brother and I were inside there.
And what about your parents?
My father was taken out. My mother was not taken out, pretending they were taking him and my uncle to work, to do a job for the Germans, you know, which is obviously potential. My father never came back. My uncle came back. It's the most horror story you can imagine. And he was there for a few days, and then they finally came back. They let him go for some reason. Then they pulled him out again, and none of them came back. My mother finally wound up in the ghetto. Yeah.
What year was this? 41?
41, yeah, 41. Then we went. All the Jews were taken to the ghetto, which was the you know, sort of outside of the city. I mean, towards the end of the city.
So you, your brother,
and my mother were in the ghetto.
Describe the conditions in the ghetto.
Well, it was very chaotic, obviously. I mean, we had small apartments. I mean, there were, I don't know, the Latvians lived there. They opened up a whole section, and I don't know where the people went that lived there before. The Latvians must have lived there. And they opened up a whole section, and then we went in there. And it was chaotic, I mean, completely chaos, because each one had to find their own space where they could sleep and live there. And we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how long we could stay there or whatever. Well, we were there a year, at least a year, in the ghetto.
How did you get along?
Well, we went to work, and outside. See, the reason why we went to the ghetto was they were probably trying to figure out a way how they can keep the people that are being in slave labor working for them, and finally getting rid of the older ones, which they did eventually, in the end. We came back one day, and we were supposedly 34,000 people in Riga ghetto, and we were 4,000 left. And they're all the older people, I mean, they were warned outside of the ghetto, were killed. They put them in the Measure Park, which was called the park, outside of the ghetto, and they machine gunned them, and they dug ditches. And the reason why how we found out about it was we weren't there because one of the people there played dead, and I don't remember if it was a she or a he, came back, and then we found out what was going on there. So the ghetto we came back, there was nobody, they're all gone.
What had you been doing? What kind of work?
Well, anything. They would ship us, take us on a truck and take us to different factories. I myself, my brother and I, worked in a place where they were sending for the troops in Russia. See, they had to go to Latvia now to get to Russia. So they were taking us every day to that place, and we would work sorting out clothes and so on. That was not the job was not so bad, but other jobs were terrible. We had to carry a piano on the 5th floor, a few people, narrow staircase, all kind of hard labor stuff.
So were these the Jewish things that were being shipped to Germany? Well,
No. These were things that the Germans, that came from Germany, like the uniform, pilots, airplane pilots. They had in the wintertime it was very cold there, in Russia, so they made them in Germany. I think they made them in Germany, and they sent them to Latvia, and from Latvia they distribute them to the pilots wherever they were, and send them to Russia. This was distribution. It wasn't a factory. It was like a storage place, where they stored This is only one of the things.
but for example, the piano that you had to move.
Well, like for instance, they would take over the Jewish homes. The Jews were in the ghetto or killed. By that time, they would take over their homes. These were houses, apartments, mostly a lot of them were houses, and they had pianos. And some of the apartments they were on the 5th floor. We had to either take them down or take them up. In other words, the Germans would go in there and live there. That was their headquarters, and they would take over, and live there. So we had to do all kind of hard labor. This was in the ghetto.
So you came home one day, and your mother was gone.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, we were, of course, when we came in, we didn't know what was going on. Then, of course, some of them, few people that were hiding, they told us, of course. They were hiding in a closet or somewhere, or in a toilet. They couldn't find them, and these were older people mostly. We found out very soon what happened, But we weren't there when, we went very early in the morning. They used to put us in a truck and take us out of the ghetto. And then we would come home late in the evening, late in the afternoon, or sometimes in the evening. It depends what kind of jobs there were. So we found out very soon what happened.
And what did happen?
Well, they shot them all. They took him out to the woods. They dug ditches beforehand. I mean, this was all planned before, obviously. And the younger ones, the reason why we weren't there, because we were outside working, and about 4,000 of us were outside of the ghetto. When I came back, there was nobody there.
The
But
children?
for a few people. The children, well, I had some horror stories, of course, about the children. Well, as I said, these were people that were hiding, and they came out after they all left, you know. The Germans were already gone. I mean, the Jews were gone, and the Germans were still there, but, you know, they mixed in with us. This is all I remember vaguely. I mean, there are other things maybe happened, but I don't remember the rest of the thing. But the one thing I remember, they told us that they saw a German picking up a little child, an infant, throwing him there and shooting. And that happened in many ghettos, I guess, in other places. You know, it wasn't unusual. Target shooting by throwing him in the air, and that we found out right away as soon as we came to the ghetto. That we were asking these questions, the way you're asking me now. That's what we were asking them, you know. And that seemed to be that they were doing. And the Latvians helped them. You see, the Latvians were, they said, they're big anti-Semites. They hated the Jews, and they joined the Germans. And many Latvians were part of the shooting. Apparently, they were helping them. They were helpers. Imagine where you were in the ghetto, it must have been the same kind of thing, right? Okay.
So there were 4,000 people left. What happened then?
Well, then the routine started again. Every morning we would go to work, stand in line, get our food, you know, and that went on for quite a long time.
Where did you get the food?
Well, they would give us some food on the job, you know. We would go there early in the morning, and they would give us food there because they needed us to work. You know, they couldn't work if we didn't have any food, you know. And sometimes we would get some food by doing something for them. In a particular job where they give us a sandwich or something, or some people had leftovers, maybe diamonds or a watch or whatever, and you know, we trade with the Latvians that worked there. There were also Latvians that worked at that place, real Latvians, you know. And we would, but I don't remember exactly how we got, but the food, they would feed us, had to feed us, you know. Otherwise they wouldn't have any people working for them. But also we would sometimes get some food from the outside, you know, from either German soldiers or the Latvians, and trade with them. They wouldn't give it to us, but we trade with them for shoes or whatever, you know, whatever we had, if we had.
So how did they behave towards you?
Who?
The Germans.
The Germans? They behaved like most of the Germans. They were yelling and screaming and dirty Jew, and you know, that's how they behaved. And if you went out of line, they would push you, and you know, that's I'm talking about the ghetto now, not the concentration camp. And they would shoot people occasionally. Now, there was a thing about the police. Now there were about, I don't remember, 9 or 12 policemen were there, Jewish policemen in the ghetto, so they would sort of oversee what was going on there. And they found apparently somebody, I was told it was a German Jew who was in the ghetto. He's from Vienna. That was telling the Germans that the Jews were hiding ammunition. And it was apparently not too far where I lived, where my brother and I were staying, in a cellar somewhere under there was a stove, these metal rings, the iron rings, you know, and they were. And he told them that it was there, and then they shot all the policemen, machine gunned them. I didn't see them doing it. I was at work at the time, but that's what happened. So there was a lot of, there were a lot of killing going on there during that year. One guy would stand in line the right way. He would go up with a pistol and shoot him, but not as much as in the camps, And it happened occasionally in the ghetto.
What else do you remember about the ghetto?
Well, that's about it. I mean,
Were there any cultural activities in the ghetto?
We tried to get together and talk and figure out what the hell was going on and what we should do and so on. I was only 17 years old at that time, so my brother used to kind of be more active in it than I was, because he was a little older and he was. They used to get together and talk about how we're going to get out of this mess, But of course, what could you run? There's no place to go. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any. I mean, see, it was much more difficult to get out in the camps because they shaved your head and they had have no clothes and they had the striped clothes. In the ghetto it was very easier, but the Latvians wouldn't take us in. They were afraid, or they just they wouldn't do it. I don't know. Maybe there were a few that did get wound up in the Latvian home, and they would save them, but I didn't know who they were. But my brother tried it once to try to get out of the ghetto. There's no way to go. It was very risky to get out there. If they catch you, you're finished. But I was never. Everybody was more interested in the daily survival, So we weren't yet. Some people more alert about what was going on there, But as far as I'm concerned, for myself and my brother and I, we were more or less worried about what are we going to eat tonight, And occasionally they would find somebody at the gate coming back from work. We would try to smuggle in some food, and they would have it in a double-decker and a canister of water or whatever, or a shoe, whatever. Occasionally they would find them doing it, discover it, and we never saw them again. So these are mainly my memories of the ghetto. There were some, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.